Okay. Welcome to another episode of All Things in the Name of Love. And today, first and foremost, I'm Sophia Riesberg, the host, as you know, and today I have with me a beautiful guest who I was guided to connect with. He is a multidisciplinary, multidimensional, is what I'm hearing, being of light, who, among other things, is a filmmaker, a speaker, a composer and musician, and a fine artist. And I was called to reach out to him because I felt the light in his soul and I felt the need to have a conversation. So thank you so much, Antonio. Thank you for the work you do in the world and thank you for your time and space.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you so much, Sophia, for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share what comes through and to connect with other like-hearted folks. So thank you
Yeah,
so much for reaching out.
you're welcome. So the first question I always ask is, tell me a little bit about your spiritual journey.
All right. Well, at about 8 years old, I remember being at church with my grandmother. It was a modest Catholic church in Southern California that had the big, beautiful altars. To me as an 8-year old, they were scary, candlelit, and sad faces, hurt faces. And it was just something that intrigued me. And ritually, every Sunday, about 15 minutes into the sermon, I would get up to go to the bathroom. And I just needed to get out, And at 8 years old, I didn't really understand what was being talked about. And it was kind of droning on in that monotonous voice. So I had to get out of the pews and go wander around. And so I would use the excuse of going to the bathroom so I could go and explore a little bit. And on the way to the bathroom, I'd have to pass by the various altars. It's very dimly lit. There's incense burning, the strong smells. And I would walk by seeing the flickering candles and looking up and seeing Jesus and Mary and all of the different saints. And as I walked past one, I remember it very vividly. It was the one with Jesus on the cross, but it was a smaller one. It wasn't the main one. And I remember looking at it and then scanning down the whole statue until I got to the surface of the altar where all the candles were. And right there in the middle was this big bowl of holy water. And I remember that people would always, put their fingers in and do the Trinity. And as I was standing there, I had this revelation. It was this epiphany. And it was this epiphany that if I wanted to be holy, if I wanted to be like Jesus, and I thought, why didn't anybody else think of this? I mean, people should know. So if I wanted it, all I would have to do is chug it. So if I just drank all this holy water, I would be holy. And so I know I look left, I look right, and I'm imagining that it's safe and it's clear. So I literally climb up over the little fence that separates the, walking area from the altar. And I reach up and I grab it and I just start chugging it. And I spill water on my shirt and everything. And I remember the flavor was kind of like pennies and chewing gum and tin foil. It was a weird flavor. Well, I drank it all, and as I put the bowl back, I'm waiting for this, the clouds to open up and the angel choir to start singing. And as I step back down and I kind of thump on the ground, I hear, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I look over, and there's this, huge Jedi, with his cloak, and he comes storming at me, and he grabs me by the shoulder and he runs me over to the main hall area and literally interrupts the whole service and said, "Whose child is this?" And, my grandma's sitting there and she gets up all wobbly and nervous and walks out. And he proceeds to, say how unruly and blasphemous and all this that I was. And my grandmother simply, she had her death claws. That was how she controlled me as a child, was with these death pinchers. And so they transferred the pinchers from him to her, and then she had me by the shoulder, and I was just standing there completely shocked. I could not understand what was going on. I thought I had this solution. I wanted to tell everybody, like, guys, I figured it out. This is how we be like Jesus. We just chug the holy water. So my spirituality started pretty early with curiosity and desire for connection to something bigger. And I think it came from my grandmother's influence of raising me in the Catholic Church. And ultimately we never went back to that church, and I never talked to my grandma about it. I grew up in a family that didn't really talk about stuff. So after that
Mm.
happened, I got sent to my room, and I remember leaning against the door, hearing her call her sister as she in Spanish tells her sister about this horrible priest who yelled at her grandson. And in that moment there was this little moment of kind of rest in that, okay, she's not actually furious at me. She's on my side. And then we never talked about it again. And next Sunday we didn't go to church, and I wasn't about to say anything. I didn't want to go back and get yelled at. And then
Yeah,
within a few weeks I had forgotten, all about it. Um, and I remember my friends asking, why didn't you come to church? And I said, oh, I don't know. My grandma didn't take me. And so that's how it kind of started for me. This curiosity and this desire to connect with something much deeper. Yeah.
I love that. I love that the innocence and the curiosity. I think what happens when we're young, we have that innate wisdom. When I was 10, my grandpa died and sat on my bed for 3 days because I felt him. And so I asked my minister, because I grew up in a Protestant church, I'm like, so how do you pray?
Hmm.
And he's like, you pray. I'm like, not helpful. How do you pray? And he couldn't answer me. And he just dismissed me like I was some crazy thing. And I'm like, but no, that's not like, because, early on we feel that like this conscript doesn't really quite work, but we don't know where to find what we need.
Right.
And so it's this fascinating journey of like trying to find the way of remembrance. And so were there any pivotal moments that spurred you on to deeper remembrance?
Well, my life is filled with those moments, honestly. Um, I've had, I mean, there's so many to choose from. I think of later in my childhood, probably around 10 or 11. I remember being very, very, very sick. And I had, some kind of, maybe it was like strep throat or something. But for me, I thought I was dying. And there was, four days or so that I was just in bed. And I remembered very clearly that I was laying there asleep. Then I woke up and just heard the sounds. I heard my grandma and my grandpa in the kitchen. And I remember feeling somebody sit on my bed and then pet me, kind of like mess
Mm,
with my hair a little bit and then rub from my shoulder down my arm. And it was this extreme comfort and extreme warmth. And I thought that it was my grandma. Um, and so I laid there for a little bit. I was facing, away from that side of the bed.
mm,
And I remember feeling the warmth on my leg, on like my back. And then I turn my head to look over while I'm feeling this hand petting my arm, and there's no one there whatsoever. And I look, and it's like, wow. I mean, there's something there, but I don't see anyone.
mm,
And I just remember saying, "Who is this? Who are you?" And I just felt a hand on my forehead, and then I just rested and fell back asleep. And that evening, I guess that happened around midday, and that evening I was completely better. And I wasn't sick anymore, and I was back to just being a crazy kid and wanting to run around and play. I remember my grandma saying, like, Mijo, what are you doing? You should be in bed. You're still sick. I'm like, no, I feel great. I feel great. Somebody healed me. I don't know if it was you or grandpa, but you healed me. And they just dismissed it like, oh, silly little boy. But yeah, that was another moment where I felt something reinforcing that there's much more than just this body. And I feel like I've had that awareness as long as I can remember. And
mm.
in my teens, I'm skipping over so many details, but in my teens, I had developed a split life. There was my church
Mm,
life, which I had explored different churches at that point. And then there was my teenage, 17-year-old life, which was
mhm,
one of just imagine the Fast and the Furious. Like I was a street racer in Southern California. I had a fast import, Acura Integra car. I was staying out till 3 in the morning, doing illegal street racing, hanging out, listening to hip hop music. But then by day, I had a very nice, respectable girlfriend, and I'd go to church, and I was studying, to be a pastor. Um,
mm,
and both were very meaningful and both were fully me, but there was this divide. And
mm.
leading up to, I think maybe around 16 years old, I started having this recurring dream, maybe once a month or something. And it was a dream in which I would get into a severe car accident and my vehicle would spin and then everything would go into slow motion and there'd be this warm white light and like cushion of cotton around me during the impacts. And then I would spin and then I would stop and then I would wake up. And I kept having this dream. And then later in my 17th year, that accident actually happened, and I wasn't racing or anything, but there was a moment I was just leaving the street races. It was a dead night. There were no races going on. There was just too much police presence. So I'm driving back and I'm transitioning from one freeway to the next. And for some reason, in the process of that turn, my front wheels lost traction and I overcompensated and it put me into this spin. And I remember it so clearly the moment that I started to feel the spin, had the realization of, oh, this is it. This is the dream. Holy
Yeah.
cow. And I just went for the ride and it went just like the dream and nobody was hurt. We should have been. We should have been definitely hurt. Even the fire department was surprised that nobody was injured. It was me and a couple of other friends. And the car was completely totaled, and we had a big old car pileup. There's, I think, 7 or 8 cars eventually that were crashed into mine because it was the middle of the night, an all black car, no lights, in the shadow of the freeway overpass, and it was just insane. And that was a moment that I feel that spirit, God, universe, whatever term you want to put on it, was motivating me to make a decision that I had been pondering, and that decision was whether to stay in that environment or to get myself out of it. And I had a fork in the road essentially. I could see where my life would end up should I have stayed. And my option at the time was to join the military and go into the Coast Guard. And so that was one of the things that really pushed me to get out of that environment and shift my direction. And I chose the Coast Guard because it was the one that felt of most service to our country locally and not going out to fight wars or to, leave, but to actually defend and protect the country around its coastal borders. And
Mm,
so yeah, that's where I went there. So I mean, there's many moments in my life where things would happen that were not what you would consider traditional and redirects and path alignments. And so that has reinforced this idea that there's something much bigger than me out there and that I have the ability to align myself with it. And as I've grown and now as an adult, I really feel that I understand much more deeply the power of that alignment and
mhm,
how my emotions and things are there to let me know when I'm in and out of alignment with that, what I would call a true
mhm,
nature or that divine essence.
mm. No, I love that because it is that navigation of I remember I shut myself down because I'm highly sensitive. Like layers of sensitivity that I'm finally beginning to understand where I can like this pine cone wanted to be part of the podcast today.
Hmm.
Um, and so in high school, I had to numb myself out because I was feeling all of the people that went through the high school and the objects and the everything, and I got overstimulated. So by the time I got married at a very young age, I couldn't hear my intuition. And when I was 29, my intuition came in the form of a dream where I had stayed married to my ex-husband for 50 years, and I woke up and stabbed him to death with an ice pick in the dream.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, I guess that means I should probably leave. I don't want to stab anyone with an ice pick. So,
Right.
when we don't listen to that inner knowing, it will come out in
Hmm.
very strong ways, like your car accident. And I think it's just fascinating how those redirects, when we become aware of them, are for the highest unfolding for us. And it's
Sure.
just a fascinating way of remembering that.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. It's there for us, and I've learned that it wants to speak subtly. It's kind of like the parent that wants their child to listen when they say, "Hey, go do that instead."
Yeah.
But the child doesn't do it until you've said it 3 or 4 times, and you have to develop some form of tools so that they know. And I think as a parent, I've observed that there needs to be some kind of environmental shift to
Mhm.
reinforce the redirection. And I think it's the same for us, in which we need to have, I mean, we're stuck in these routines a lot of times. There's these ruts, these patterns, these behaviors, mechanisms that we've developed through, growth and childhood and conditioning. And that it's hard to break free of them, and that sometimes our higher self, our soul, however, whatever you want to credit that information coming from, needs to kind of slap us. And but it wants to speak subtly. And I think over
Yeah.
the years, I've learned um, to practice and train, cultivate the ability to listen to the subtle nudges rather than
Mhm.
waiting for the more smack in the head nudges. So there was a period when I was a school teacher when I first moved to Oregon, and I think it was my first summer break after teaching a full year of school. I went to Peru, and I wanted to go. I was called to Peru, and I wanted to go fully as a experiment and an opportunity to cultivate my intuition. So the
Mhm.
intention I had set was I'm going to go without any information whatsoever, and I'm going to show up and I'm going to listen and scrunch my eyebrows, and listen hard for guidance. And so it's summer, it's June here in the northern hemisphere, and I didn't think about it. I didn't research. So I packed for summer. Well, in Peru, it's the southern hemisphere, so it was winter and it was really cold. So first thing was to, get there and just give away all of my clothes and buy clothes that I could find there that was warm. Um, I'll try to make this one quick because this could be a longer story, but essentially, I went from Lima to a town called Arequipa within 24 hours. So from sea level to, I don't know the exact altitude, but I would say maybe around 9,000 feet, volcanic
Mhm.
high altitude community. And I got there. And that evening that I arrived, I'm sitting in the common area talking to a British fella, and his bus pulls in with these gorgeous Swedish girls, and I see all these beautiful blonde Swedish girls, and I'm 23 or 24, and um, they go settled in, they come down, they invite us to go hike the volcano the next morning. And so we have to get up at, 3 a.m. The bus picks us up, takes us to the base, and then you hike up in order to catch the sunrise of this volcano. And so I'm like, of course, I'm gonna follow these gorgeous Swedish women up the volcano. And so I go for it. Well, I make it maybe a mile before the climatization or altitude sickness kicks in. They
Yeah.
call it soroche, and it feels like my eyes are gonna pop out of my head, and I'm
Mhm.
nauseous, and I have to literally walk back down in the dark, hanging my head in shame. And my ego is just destroyed because I know that all the Swedish girls and my British friend are talking about how, see those Americans, they're out of shape and blah, blah, blah. So I get back down and I end up being sick for about 3 days. And after
Oof.
those 3 days, I carry on my journey to the Sacred Valley. And I was always called to the Sacred Valley. That was my I mean, just the name itself, the Sacred Valley. Like, oh, I have to go there. I don't know anything about it, but it's a valley that's sacred and it's known as that. I'm gonna go feel it out. And so again, I'm focusing on my intuition. I've had multiple experiences about with involving my intuition up to this point, but I'm gonna get into the juicy one. So I'm in the Sacred Valley. I'm feeling better now, and I hop in a taxi, and I have the taxi driver drive me. I don't know, maybe it was 15 or 20 miles west from the Andes. The Sacred Valley basically goes along this river. It's called the Ollantaytumbo River, and it parallels with the Andes Mountains. And the valley is to the west. And so I have him drive me into the west, into the valley, and just he's like, "Well, where are you going?" I'm like, "Oh, just keep going, just keep going, just keep going." And eventually, I was like, "Hey, this is a good spot," because the road was kind of stopped and it was getting really rough. And he said, "Wait, you want to go here?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah, this is perfect." And I have my pack on. I have some food, I have my sleeping bag, and so I'm good. And he's like, okay, like here's my number, but I don't think you'll be able to call me or anything because there's no signal out here. And I'm like, yeah, it's okay. And he drops me off and he just drives away like, crazy gringos and their crazy ideas. And so, I get there and I start walking and I do a little prayer, a little meditation, just saying, let me hear very clearly the voice of my intuition and let it guide me to whatever experience I'm here to have. And even doing that in itself, having the taxi driver take me out there was an intuitive um, action. I was sitting thinking, what am I going to do? Do I hike up to those ruins? What do I do? And I had some options and I just checked in and I listened and it told me to go out into the middle of the valley and walk back. And so I did. And as I'm walking, and it's a flat valley, fairly, I mean, maybe a little bit hilly, but ultimately, you can't miss the Andes Mountains. They're massive and they're that way. So as long as I walk that way, I'm gonna hit the river. And if I go left or right at the river, I'm gonna find a village and I'll be fine. So I could start walking, and that first evening, the sun starts setting, and I get to a fork and I can go left or right. And I said, this is one of those moments. I am here to listen to my intuition. And my intuition, I don't remember exactly what it felt like, but I remember almost like a little glitch. And I went left. And so as I'm walking left, about 10 minutes down that left trail, I hear very clearly, like, you went the wrong way, go back the other way. I said, oh, okay, gotcha. It's like, thanks. And so then I go back and I go back to that right side of the fork. And then I continue on. And it's up and down these hills. And I guess this region is called Moray, Moray. And it's infamous for this thing that I'm about to explain. So I start coming up a hill and I see flickering orange light. Um, that I think at the time is a campfire and that there's a campground or something there. And so I go up to the top of the hill, and what is revealed to me is really hard to describe. I can send you a picture of it, but we have a series of circles, and the circles are huge, massive, and it's excavated into the earth. And so you have the deepest circle, which is maybe 20 feet, 30 feet across. And then it comes up in elevation, maybe about 7 or 8 feet. And then there's a tier of another circle, and it continues that pattern. So you have this, it's like from the big part, it's maybe 60 feet, and then it comes in and drops, comes in and drops, comes in and drops.
Mm.
And what these are actually um, experimental gardens. I learned later that it's where the Incas would um, create variations of potatoes, and the water would come in and trickle down from the top, fill a certain tier, drop down, and then different levels of water, moisture,
Mm.
and stuff. So I don't remember all the details. Um, well, that's what I see is this massive thing, and my mind was like, what the hell is this? Some kind of UFO landing pad or something? But right in the center, there's a fire, and I see the silhouette of a man with his back to me, and I'm about at least 40 or 50 feet, maybe 60 feet away from him. It's breezy. I'm up higher than him. I'm on a hilltop looking down. And without looking back at me, he literally just goes like that and he waves me down. And I get goosebumps. I'm goosebumped. I'm like, what is going on? And I just take a few deep breaths. My breath is shaking a little bit because this is all a lot for me. At this point, I had not really fully embraced the crazy spiritual happenings that have happened in my life. I just kind of it's like, oh yeah, that happened, whatever. So
Yeah.
this I hadn't sat with them and embraced them. It's like, oh yeah, this is normal. So I'm shocked a bit. And so he just waves me down without looking back. And so I start fumbling my way down. I didn't know that there are stones sticking out of the walls of the tiers that are like stairs that you could walk by. So I didn't see that, didn't know that. So I actually go over and get on my belly, throw my bag down, get on my belly and jump off. And it's 8 feet high. Um, and then he looks at me and he's giggling at me. He's like, you know, and then he points at the stairs. I'm like, oh, cool. And so then I take the stairs down. I finally get there. And it still gives me goosebumps when I have this moment replay. He looks at me and he says, "You're late." I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like, you're late." And he's telling me in Spanish. He's like, "Anthony," at the time I went by Anthony. He's like, "Anthony, you're late. You should have been here 3 days ago. And I've been waiting and I was gonna leave tonight if you didn't show up." And I'm just like, what are you talking about? Who are you? How do you know my name? What do you mean I'm late? The hundreds of questions are flowing through, and he looks at me, he's like, "Calmate, calm down. It's okay. Sit down." And he has a like a alpaca wool blanket laid out, a little pillow, a little cup, and some nuts in a little bowl next to the fire. Says, "Sit down. I'll explain everything. Don't worry. You're safe. You can just relax."
Mhm.
So I throw my bag down and I sit down. He says, "Okay, so um, I'm Julio Cervantes, and my role." He's saying all this in Spanish. My role is path keeper, a travel guide of travelers, trail keeper, and what my family does and what we've done for generations is support travelers on
Mhm.
their journey. And back in the Incan times, it was pilgrims going to Machu Picchu, to the different holy sites, and they needed food or they needed instruction or medical, whatever. We were here to help them, and that was our role. And for me today, I still do that, and I'm training my son to do that. And I said, okay, that's great, but how the heck did you know? He's like, well, for me, and it's different for each of us. For me, I have dreams of people and their faces and their names and a time and a place, and I just show up. And I have so I end up sitting with this man, and he leads me on a very, very powerful internal journey in which ultimately I had the first embodied experience of oneness. Prior to that, I had mental, conceptual framework for understanding, yeah, we're all one,
Mhm.
but I didn't feel it in my body. It
Yeah.
wasn't embodied, it was all in my head. And
Mhm.
so through an experience, I was able to actually feel and embody that oneness. And it was something that was very, very, very meaningful to the rest of my life. And it took many years to process and to integrate, but eventually it was a foundational moment. And it was because was able to listen to that intuition. And I took the initiative and the time to focus and cultivate it, just like I do with my music. Like, I'm going to practice my piano. I chose at that time, I'm going to practice my intuition and spend time with it and learn it and understand how it communicates. So yeah, it was really potent. And there were so many more adventures and experiences on that trip that, we'd be talking for 3 or 4 hours. I'm compiling them all though. I've begun a book that actually starts with that. Well, it doesn't start with it. It does actually. Never mind. I was just writing it on a flight back. I was writing some more, editing a bit, and it starts with that first story of me being 8 in the church. So yeah. So I don't know when it'll be done, but I'm working on it.
love that because that we get of
So,
how wants to come through. Sorry, I had a little glitch. I was writing when I was in high school, and when I was in my 30s, I got a PhD, and I hated writing it. I hated writing a dissertation because it was like so tedious. But last year, I started writing a novel in 2014, and in November, so I was like, okay, start writing it again.
hmm
And it's like, okay, so those gifts for me, like, I've mastered one thing, so let's bring something else in that wants to be mastered. And that's what I feel like you're speaking to is that like you have these gifts, and when one shows itself up to be witnessed and to be felt and to be expressed, you turn your focus to that and allow it to come through.
definitely. I mean, I feel that every human has, I suppose, a soul's journey that they're on, and that
Hmm.
I have memories of my soul being in another body, very, very clear ones that is part of the reason I live here in Southern Oregon was familiarity and
Hmm.
experiences that I remember very clearly taking place here. Um, and I feel that through the soul's incarnation in various bodies, we are on this long journey arc of learning, evolving, and growing. And so, for example, me in this body right here in this time and age, it was my time to really cultivate my intuition, to be able to share a lot of this personal experience, not, you know, studied book experience, but embodied real life personal experience to be shared with people, whether it be through my music, through my photography, through my films, through my public speaking, my writing. It's simply just, hey, this is something that a human has experienced really deeply, and here you go,
Hmm.
and do what you want with it. And there's no attachment to outcome. I mean,
Hmm.
obviously, I'd love people to love my album and to want to share it and to, it's called Remembrance. Interesting that you keep mentioning Remembrance. That's the name of the album. Um, of course, I want that, but I'm not attached very specifically to it. It's more the
Hmm.
actual expression. It's the
Hmm.
doing and expressing. And as a multidisciplinary artist, I want to be prolific. I want to create a lot. And what happens to it, I'll leave that up to the universe. For me,
Hmm.
it's the joy of expressing and channeling, transforming my own experiences, whether they be traumatic or they be joyful, taking those, expressing them in a way that people can connect with, and hopefully to inspire them to connect more deeply with themselves and others. And that for me right now, the biggest tool I have is curiosity. And looking back at my childhood, curiosity was not something that was encouraged. I was the annoying kid that asked all the questions and the why and the how and the until I was just shut down so much that I stopped
Hmm.
asking questions. And I feel like my this chapter of my life being so heavily focused on advocating for and demonstrating curiosity, it's part of my rebellious nature. Saying, okay, screw all that. I'm going to be rebellious by being curious, and I'm going to be hardcore curious, and I'm going to go for it. And I've traveled the world based off of curiosity, following threads of curiosity, and it's led me to the most profound life-changing events in my life and connect the deepest connections with the most unexpected people. My curiosity about what was happening in the Amazon back in 2019 and the fires and the forest and the indigenous people led me to connecting deeply and being part of just the most beautiful indigenous communities in the Amazon. And I have people that I consider family that are really close that will support me, that I can call at any time, that I can go stay in those villages at any time. And it was because I was very, very curious to know what was really happening in that region. And I've learned and I advocate for that us as humans, that if we really settle into the concept of curiosity at a deep level, first internally, because I feel that we can only meet people at the level of depth that we've met ourselves. And so I want to be very curious about what makes me me.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I behave the way I behave? Why did I say that the other day? Why do I feel this? Just really digging and not with
Mm-hmm.
any need to analyze, but just simply to experience and dig out of
Mm-hmm.
curiosity. There's no outcome again. It's just I'm really curious, and there's no judgment to what I find.
Yeah.
I maybe perhaps I understand, oh, that pattern that I've had is rooted in this conditioning from my childhood. That doesn't align and serve me now, so I'm going to transform that. I'm going to thank it for its service and say, hey, you don't need to be there anymore. I see how you loved me and supported me. For example, I had a severe back injury, and I was told, well, I had a severe back injury that eventually got better, but what remained was this nervous system memory that if I do some kind of movement, my lower back would lock up. And for years, I resented it. And I said, why is this happening? And I was frustrated. I'd sneeze and then I was done for 2 weeks and I couldn't live the way I wanted to live. Well, at a certain point a few years ago, I realized that that pattern, just through meditation and understanding and curiosity about what's happening in my back, I realized that what was happening is that my nervous system was sending a protection signal to lock up the muscles to protect my spine. So then I had a conversation with that. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, hey, you know what? All these years I've been mad at you. And I realized what you're doing is you're trying to help and protect me. And that's so kind and thoughtful of you. Thank you for that, for the years of protecting me. And I'm sorry for the times that I yelled at you and I was frustrated and resentful. And what I understand now is that you were just trying to help me. And I wanted to let you know that it's not needed anymore. That help isn't needed because I'm strong and I am healthy and I'm balanced and mentally and physically and spiritually in alignment. And I don't need that protection. So let's find another use for that energy. And
Mm-hmm.
from that point on, I don't have those um, episodes of, picking up a pencil and then being locked up for a week. It was this curiosity to what was causing that, realizing it and saying, oh, I was yelling at something that was protecting me.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, I should be grateful for it, appreciating it, and communicating with it to let's find another use for its energy. And it has. And again, that's a way that curiosity inwardly has led me to life
Mm-hmm.
changing experiences. Because I could have been one of those folks that just have back pain for the rest of their life. And I wasn't willing to accept that. That wasn't in my cards because I love being active and, having kids. I want to jump on the trampoline. I want to wrestle with them. I want to do all these things and not be worried that my back's going to lock up.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew it just wasn't in my cards to be a person that has back pain their whole life.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to accept that. So that curiosity inwardly has led me to understand the depths of myself, which has in turn allowed me to really be present and connect deeply with other people and
Mm-hmm.
the outside world and the environment and the animals and the trees and the forests and the oceans. It's all the curiosity has led to that ability to connect at such a deep level, and that's what I share in my concerts and in my keynotes when I speak for nonprofits and helping them raise funds or
Mm-hmm.
corporations and their leadership gatherings and helping inspire connection in their company culture and bring teams together to connect, not just be aligned,
Mm-hmm.
but to connect
Yeah.
because we could be aligned on, hey, we have a podcast interview today at this time. We're in alignment,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't mean we're connected, And then
Right.
if there's issues and we can't make it happen, we just let it go. But if we're really connected, and we see each other and we understand each other, we're going to fight to keep that podcasting happening. We won't just let it go because we're
Mm-hmm.
connected, and connection is really important in teams and families. And, that's why we're here is to connect.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that you speak to all of this. There's so many things that are popping in my head. The one that I want to, that's coming through right now is so, that internal dialogue and the curiosity. I am innately curious, and I've been doing research since I was 18. And when I started doing my internal work, I brought that researcher in because I had a history of being able to find anything I wanted. And so I bring this collective historian into my internal self to find a piece. And at one point, my internal 6-year-old said, "Why are you torturing me? Why? You don't need to know the answer. Just hold space for me because you're like re-traumatizing me with this need to know the thing instead of the curiosity." So my curiosity has come through with somatic work and just being
Mm,
present, and asking what you said, like how do I show up for my body in a state of curious wonder and ask it what it needs. And that is such a gift because there's everything in our body, whatever ache it is something that wanted to protect us when we were younger and we didn't have the tools.
mhm,
And to allow ourselves the grace to slow down and actually listen is such a gift for the soul and the body. And I love that you articulated it that well. Thank you.
mhm. Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
that feels good. Yeah, that you're mentioning that, any ache or pain is it I've experienced for myself, and that's all I have is that self-experience, is that it's saying something that wants to be heard. And if we keep ignoring it, it'll get louder and louder and louder. And
Yeah.
so that's sensitivity. I grew up being told not to be so sensitive. Now I'm
Mhm.
extremely sensitive and proud of it. And I use that sensitivity to make my life and the lives of those around me as good as possible and to serve with that sensitivity. I see how much of a gift it is.
Yeah.
And I encourage my kids to maintain their sensitivity and be able to articulate it. But yeah, it's having that ability to sense and feel. And I keep coming back to curiosity because that has been the tool that I realized is the guiding principle that allows for us to explore these things without any judgment,
Mm-hmm.
without any real analysis. It's just, I'm curious, and bringing that curiosity into relationships, into potential conflicts and difficult conversations. It's
Mm-hmm.
so disarming. It's there's no judgment. It's like I'm really curious to that perspective. Especially today, with such polarization in our beliefs in our world, curiosity is what allows me to engage with anybody because I'm not
Yeah.
trying to convince anybody that what I think is right or
Mm-hmm.
that I'm the one that has the answer. I'm simply sharing my experience to those that want to hear it, not pushing it on anybody. But more importantly, I'm just curious to understand how people think the way they think, why they
Yeah.
believe the way they believe. And I'm not trying to convince them, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to be curious. And that's helped me maintain a level of groundedness and safety for myself because I'm the one
Mm-hmm.
that's responsible for my own safety. And so
Mm-hmm.
that means I don't digest all the toxic information that gets comes in. My little boy's like, thank you for keeping me safe from that stuff. My little inner child, he's 8. He's that same boy that drank the holy
Mm-hmm.
water. That's who my inner child is. And keeping that curiosity and wonder, like you said, is what maintaining that and expressing it and living it in embodying that has given me the opportunity to dance and play in this modern world, which could be so overwhelming and so toxic, and be
Mm-hmm.
able to do it without that complete overwhelm and without that feeling of like it's hopeless. It
Mm-hmm.
keeps me excited to explore new ways I can communicate what I feel all of us to some degree are feeling and are experiencing without carrying it on my back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I completely get that because that wonder, that state of wonder, I'll yesterday I'm hiking in snow. The trees made me pause. And the lighting was like, lighting is a
Hmm.
thing. And the natural light was like, okay, I could never replicate that. This is
Hmm.
so magical. And I have to just be in this state of joy and wonder that
Hmm.
the magic of this place that we're in gifts us. And my friend that I was hiking with, she was like taking off, and I'm like, yeah, I can't. I just have to be present with this. And she was like, what are you looking at? And I'm like, this magic. Like, come back and look at this magic. She was like, oh my gosh, you're right. And it's just
Hmm.
because I have that state of like openness, and since the trees, especially cedars, talk to me a lot, they stop me and gift me these presents. And
Hmm.
when we offer ourselves that state of curious wonder, so much magic can unfold, and there's
Hmm.
so many distractions that we don't need to participate in.
Right.
And what is perceived as selfish of like how does one know self, right? That's the biggest thing for me, is like, how can I know the deepest version of who I am, and how do I express it in the world?
Hmm.
That's the greatest gift we can give each other.
Hmm. It is. It's so true. And you hear how trendy it is in branding and stuff. You have to be authentic. You have to be authentic. And okay, yeah, it serves us to be authentic.
Yeah.
Where do you find that? What is authentic? What level of
Yeah.
authenticity and that's where the inner exploration, the curiosity.
Mm.
What I feel confident that I'm very, very authentic in all of my expressions because I know that I'm getting it from the depths of myself. The expressions are
Mhm.
coming from deep within me, not from a surface level, not from parroting what I hear other people say or,
Mhm.
just repeating Instagram insta therapist
Yeah.
wisdom. It's like, no, this is coming from deep inside of me. So I know it's
Mhm.
authentic. And so as we all move on our journey and walk alongside each other, that serves us to remember that true authenticity comes from deep within us, and the only one of the ways we can get there is through inner curiosity.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
It is. What has lit you up most with your curiosity?
I think what it's the moments that I feel most invigorated and in alignment are when I'm able to use that curiosity to help someone remember
Mm.
through the way curiosity expresses itself in the form of questions during conversation. I do coaching for people as well. I have a few clients that I coach, artists transitioning from day jobs to full-time art, men who are stepping into their masculinity. Um, that what lights me up the most is when I can feel someone's energy. I could feel their internal questions
Mm.
and then give them voice so that then that person can have an articulated question to ask themselves and essentially helping people remember their truth through conversation. And as a
Mm.
coach, I always, everything is grounded in pointing people back to themselves and that I'm not here to do anything but be a really high def, ultra 8K, big screen mirror so that you can see all the details that are there. And I'm not bringing
Mm.
anything external to you. I'm
Yeah.
simply helping you see your divine nature. And
Mm.
same thing when helping people heal. I'm not a healer that does something. I help a person facilitate through the space, through
Mhm.
conversation, for their own healing to take place.
Mhm.
And it always comes back to the each of us have everything we need. And so
Mhm.
when I have a session with somebody, or when I'm coaching, I'm doing a group workshop or something, and I can feel the energetic shift of people remembering and realizing like, oh, that's right, for
Mhm.
themselves. At the
Yeah.
end of that session, I'm just alive. I'm so alive, and I just feel all of my cells vibrating. I feel my soul. My little boy is sitting there like, flying his rocket ship and it's amazing. And so utilizing curiosity as a tool to support people's remembrance. And I think that's
Mhm.
probably one of the most that light me up the most.
I felt that. I felt that. I felt the way you just sank into it. And I get it because I do that with animals. So, like, how do I help them remember that? I'm being called to share this. A few months ago, I was doing a group healing session for animals. They collectively came in and asked me to help them deactivate multiple past lifetimes of being othered by humans.
What does that mean to being othered?
You know how we own pets? That's a
Hmm.
separation.
Hmm.
They don't want to be put on a hierarchical tier of less than.
Hmm.
And I was like, wow, you're feeling that
Hmm.
because we're the ones that have separated everyone as other than us.
Hmm.
And it's just a different layer of otherness
Hmm.
that the animals are done with. And so I felt a relief from the animals when we tapped that out. And I was like, how cool is that? That we get to
Hmm.
do this work in the world and help others who don't think they have voice to have voice. And it just,
Hmm.
I get it. I get it.
Hmm.
I get the
Yeah,
joy.
it's definitely a beautiful experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when we are in alignment, those are the times that we will feel the the experience, that the joy and light so strongly is when we those moments where we feel the most alive are the things that we should be focusing our energy on. I don't
Hmm.
say should, I don't like to say should. They're the
Yeah.
things that it would serve us mostly to focus
Hmm.
on and to align ourselves with. And so
Yeah.
I scan my day-to-day activities, and those that bring me the most invigorating life experience are the ones I put my energy on. And of course, it means that I have to do emails, I have to do content creation. There's things that aren't as exciting, but because they are for this outcome, or this, not outcome, for this expression,
Hmm.
then they're all aligned with that. And I can have that same energy, doing my best. It's not perfect
Yeah.
all the time. It, you know, we have our ups and downs. We're vibrating. So,
Yeah.
mhm.
Mm. Well, I'm going to honor our time, even though I know I want to talk to you for hours because I'm just enjoying this so much. I'm going to ask the final question, and that is, how do people find you?
Well, my website, antoniomelendez.org. On there, you have all of my social medias. I have YouTube that I've been neglecting, but at a certain point, I'll start putting stuff on there. But yeah, the website is the best place. It does have links to all my music, to some of the film work, the impact work I do with nonprofits and coaching and public speaking. My photography is there. I do fine art. Every bit of expression of mine is aligned with serving social or environmental issues. So even my
Mhm.
concerts, if I have a concert, it's partnered with a nonprofit that's serving some, you know, some issue that needs to be addressed in our community. So
Mhm.
I'm looking actively for partners to continue to expand this work and reach audiences with that curiosity and deeper connection with themselves. And there's that brings a lot of value to different venues, from nonprofit work to corporate work to team building and all this stuff. And so I'm actively looking for partnerships with organizations that feel the value of that, can accept, understand how meaningful it is, and want to collaborate in creating experiences for people. And using my music, my photography, whatever art form it resonates with the organization, that I can bring in and custom create something. So just looking for expanding that network of impact, and supporting people in being curious with themselves, connecting with themselves, and then with the world around them.
Thank you so very, very much for your time, your wisdom, your beingness, and for being on the planet at this time in consciousness.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me and for holding and creating this container to allow people to share.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate you.
I appreciate you too.
All right.